The winning strategy is called a winning strategy because it's a survival strategy. And if you're hearing this podcast, you're surviving. Right?
Yeah, right.
Now, the low end of survival is breathing.
Yes.
And on the high end of survival is success, certain levels of success.
Yeah.
The winning strategy is responsible for all of that success. It is also responsible for all of the limits that you have put on your life, unconsciously put on your life. Once people see that, they see, that, if you will, the dark side of the winning strategy, the things that has held me back from doing because I didn't believe they were possible.
Right.
Maybe not here, I didn't think about that, but in the unconscious,
Right.
it has set these borders up around you that say, I can't go there, I can't go there, I can only do what's here. And so that then is the limitation that it puts on us. And the goal here, and I think the goal for our God, is to be limitless.
Welcome back to another edition of the Faith in Real Life podcast. My name is Greg Wasinski, and I'm so blessed that you are with us today. And I'm so excited about this season of the Faith in Real Life podcast because we are interviewing people who have powerful stories, not only about their life of faith, but what it has meant for their life in the real world and how they are putting that faith into action and how God is speaking to them in order to change the world. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. And today my guest is not only a good friend of mine, but somebody who I really believe is making a powerful difference in the world. And so I want to welcome to the Faith in Real Life podcast, Mr. Kurt Treu. Kurt,
well, hello, friend. Greg Wasinski.
I like it that you have, you also have a voice for radio.
Oh, well, you know.
I mean,
I have a face for it too, but that's another story.
That is very true. You know, one of the things that I love that we kind of came together. I guess it was kind of through men's fellowship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, at our own church, but it's been over a decade, and you know, God just works, and He places you in a place, and then He has a plan, and then you wait a decade, and then it kind of comes into fruition, which is just kind of how it works.
Just had to let it simmer for a while, right?
You have to be open to it, too,
be open
right?
to it.
Yeah.
That's
now,
right.
You've been a coach for a transformational coach, I should say, is the big word, but you've done that a little over 12 years, and I do want to talk about that because I think people really need to know about not only the work that you do, but the lives that you're changing as part of it, and now why faith is important in that work. But tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm a native Clevelander and grew up on the east side of Cleveland, which is the better side of Cleveland, I'm just saying.
It truly is.
It truly is. Large family, 5 kids, 2 parents and a dog.
Yeah.
And you know, it was a wonderful childhood and life, and went to high school there. Graduated and went to a place called Wittenberg University.
Where's Wittenberg?
Wittenberg's in Springfield, Ohio.
Oh.
Yes. It actually was a great school, and believe it or not, I went there to play football, and I did that for a year.
Wow.
And
what position?
I was a free safety, defensive back.
You limber little man, you.
I'm telling you what, skinny little boy from Cleveland, Ohio.
There's a song about that.
Well, Alex Bevan, there you go. And then realized that was an awful lot of work, and I wasn't getting paid to do it. And so for the next 3 years, I played rugby, which was smart. Wow. You know, that was pretty smart.
You got some toughness in there.
Yeah, well, the parties are better. There's no doubt about that.
That is, you know what? I have to I know, I have to watch myself on this podcast, but let's just say that one of the few times that I don't remember is because of meeting 2 rugby players in a pool down in Mexico, and they invited me to happy hour with them.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a bad combination.
Yeah,
right
that was
there.
the end of the day.
That was the end of that. But it was a lot of fun, and I landed a banking job before graduating. So my last semester of college was a lot of fun because I already had a job in my pocket.
Yeah.
I still graduated though, which was great. And I started as a management trainee at a bank. And at nights, I went and got my master's, my MBA.
All right.
And that was, a lot of work. Fast forward 32 years in banking.
Wow.
Played a lot of roles. I was on the retail side for a while, the branch side. I was on the small business side and ran a bunch of cowboys and cowgirl.
Which is kind of neat, though. Yeah. In my former career in website development and advertising, when you're in small business like that, though, you get to meet a myriad of people.
Yes.
Like, it's not just one industry. You're meeting very many people with very different needs, which eventually are things that I think that we just store away in our head, especially when God calls us maybe to do something to work with people. We can take all these stories and share them.
Yeah, and it's extraordinary when you go out to the small businesses to see what people do for a living.
Yeah, right.
And
how they do it.
And how they do it. And, we make this widget. Well, how many of those do you make? We make millions of that little widget, right?
Yeah. And next month we'll make millions more.
That's right. It's just it was fantastic. It was a great time in my career. Loved every minute of it. Was with a bank then for my last 22 years called U.S. Bank.
Okay.
And that was the only time I moved out of Ohio. We had bought a bank. We were called First Star at the time, but we bought a bank called U.S. Bank, and we took their name. We moved into their headquarters, very different cultures.
Where was that at?
In Minneapolis.
Okay.
So I moved to Minneapolis for 3 years, and yes, it is cold. It is very, very cold. and
it's cold when somebody from Cleveland talks about it being cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
Yeah,
it's cold. I don't think I ever would have gotten used to it, but the people up there figured out how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful quality of life. I loved my 3 years there. My wife and daughter came with me there, thankfully.
Yeah.
And after 3 years, we were able to say, you know what, mission accomplished here. And I have my successor ready, and it's time for my next chapter.
Okay.
And I'd like to be back here.
Yeah.
My parents were not getting younger. My wife's parents weren't getting younger. So we were able to come back to Cleveland, and thankfully I came back as the president for the market.
Wonderful.
And responsible for Cleveland, Akron, and Columbus, Ohio at that time.
That's great.
And
I know that you've had, before we move into the business side, I just want to say that you've always had a love for the arts.
Yes.
Right? And I know that you've done singing and your family does singing, but then you're also involved with the Playhouse in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that, because I think that that's a really neat aspect of your life.
Well, my father was the music director for our high school, for the school system for 35 years. He was a choir director at church for 50 years.
Cool.
My mother had a beautiful soprano voice, and so all the kids sang and played instruments.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So we weren't the Von Trapps, but you
were the Treus.
We were the Treus. And I played trumpet, and I actually did that after college. I played in a jazz band at a place called the Hermit Club, which was fun. So that was a nice nighttime gig. We played a few times a year. We'd rehearse on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and we'd give a concert on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, right.
It was a blast. And I did a lot of musical theater myself in high school, and then at that Hermit Club.
Very cool.
A lot of fun roles, and have been singing, as you know, in the church choir.
Yeah.
For, gosh, I don't know how many years now, 10 years, something like that. So
anybody can see Kurt proclaim the psalm at Church of the Holy Angels in Bainbridge Township.
Come and see us. Yeah. Come and see us sometime. But music has been very important. And there, when I was playing market president for the bank, I became very involved in Playhouse Square. Mm-hmm. And Playhouse Square is the second largest theater district outside New York City. A
lot of people don't know that you have New York, and then you have Cleveland, and then Chicago.
Yep. It's extraordinary. And that has been a real gift to me, because it's a great excuse to go down to the theater and see great shows, but also be involved in what we do. It's more about economic development than anything, and education, and just being a gem, if you will, in Cleveland.
Yeah, right.
If you haven't been to Cleveland, Ohio to see Playhouse Square, you got to do it.
There are not many people that visit Cleveland, Ohio, and don't fall in love with the people and the culture. And we might not have the same vast number of restaurants or the same size as some of these big cities, but really the people are unmatched. And this development of Playhouse Square has been huge. And I know they even have an apartment complex down there, and their endowments are going to allow them to be able to continue on with the arts for so long. And, you know, we do share that as a former theater major, and Amy, my wife, is a professional actress in musical theater. I think it's an important part of the story because, you know, being well-rounded is a gift.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, here you are. Usually, an accountant's mind can be associated with very analytical and very literal and straight, and that's how you work in banking. But I know that you are more on some of the sales end and things like that, which helps you read people. But having the arts, I think, as a background for each of us, gives us the ability to just appreciate what God has blessed us with in the gift of falling in love with a story, or going to the orchestra and sitting in Severance Hall, which is a beautiful music hall here in Cleveland, and you feel like the world doesn't even exist outside those walls.
Yeah.
So I think that that's all important, and we take these moments, and they become part of our story. Yeah. And so now, even in the work that you're doing in transformational coaching, you're even helping people come out of their shell by using some of those talents as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
art therapy, right? You know, people tapping into, and I think that this becomes important when we talk about transformation, which is a lot of what this podcast is about. How do we take ourselves and begin a transformation process that isn't always comfortable? However, if we look at it in a way that God has created us to be someone very special and unique for the rest of the world, if we can take that and allow ourselves to surrender and almost kind of like the Jell-O mold, kind of fall into the different places where God needs us, what we begin to see is that our life is filled with more joy, faith. We talked about the word hope before the podcast, and Kurt said, well, you know, I don't always like the word hope. And we had a great conversation that I understood what he was saying, that sometimes people take the word hope, and what they're really saying is that I wish. But if we place our hope in the Lord, we are accepting that whatever happens, happens. And the hope is that we will become the person that God created us to be. And so tell me about how you got into transformational coaching.
I'm going to, but I have to tell them now why hope came up. So
yes.
So my I don't have a problem with the word hope, other than
you're allowed.
I replace it in my mind when it's used with faith.
Yeah.
And hope to me feels like, gosh, I hope I'm right about this.
Yeah.
I hope that God's watching over. And for me, it's more about faith.
Yeah.
And I have faith in that.
Yeah.
And for me, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and I love that.
Yeah.
I love, but that's who you are. I mean, that's who, you know, that's how you process.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people listen to things, and we did talk about this too before the podcast, is that sometimes people listen to things and they immediately want to pick out what's wrong with it, or how they would have said it different, or what they think. Look, here's the deal. There's 1,000 different ways for this moment to go. There's 1,000 different ways for you to connect with what God wants you to experience. Experience it the way that you need to, but accept that other people see it a different way and relate to it in a different way. So I love it. I think, yes, we need this faith, and we need to rely on that.
Yeah.
And that is what helps us be transformed.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the transformational coaching.
Yeah. So I began coaching a long time ago in my banking career. And it started because we had bought so many banks, we needed to have a consistent sales management process. And so we brought in an organization, and the foundation of their program for this sales management was coaching. Their delivery method for that was to train some people and certify a couple of people inside of the bank, as coaches and as coach trainers, and I was one of those people. So in addition to my day job,
Yeah.
I taught hundreds of people on how to coach.
Wonderful.
And I personally got bitten by the coaching bug because I realized once you become a leader, you no longer make the sausage. You're only as good as your team.
Right.
And so my commitment at the time was that I'm going to invest in my team.
Amen.
And coaching was the tool. And I will tell you, it never let me down. And my teams were extraordinarily successful, and they were just, it was a great ride. And I loved my 32 years in banking, but I'm happy to say I'm fully recovered. I went through the banker recovery program.
Literally.
And I had told my wife and daughter, someday I'm going to be a full-time coach. That's what I'm going to do. Sure, Dad.
Yeah, right.
And so I finally bit the bullet 10 years ago, and I put out my own shingle as the growth coach at that time.
Yeah.
And just prior to that, and you asked about the transformational piece of it, which is all the work that I'm doing now is in the transformational area. I was introduced to a woman by the name of Tracy Goss. Tracy Goss, arguably, is one of the foremost authorities in the world on transformational leadership.
Yes, definitely.
And has taken her methodology everywhere in the world. And I was invited to attend her program. And it was a 2-week program in New York City, right off of Times Square.
Wow.
And it changed my life.
Yeah.
It changed my life. And I committed before I left that session that I was going to be the person who was going to bring this methodology forward. Because, when I went through the program, there were 20 of us in the program. And as I walked the streets of New York City to and from the program, I thought, oh my gosh, look at all these people. Their heads are down. They're just scurrying.
Yeah.
And how fortunate am I that I got introduced to this methodology?
Yeah.
And I want to spread the word.
Well, I can just see the passion and the emotion, right? And Tracy recently passed away, and I was blessed to view her celebration of life online because it was in Texas, and I know you were there and got to honor her with your gift of song. But to hear how people were moved and transformed, and leaders of Fortune 500 companies to pastors of Lutheran churches to just people across the board.
Yeah.
And it amazes me that when you talk about seeing other people, when you come out of a transformative experience like that, all of a sudden you begin to see with the lens of what's possible. And so you see these people that you want to help, that you want to lead, that you're like, it's kind of like Jesus telling the woman at the well, if you only knew the gift of God that was right in front of you, right? And you're like, if you only knew what was going on upstairs here in New York and how these 20 people were being changed, you all would stop doing what you're doing and you'd be in that room.
That's right. Absolutely right.
And you've continued to do that for so many people.
Yeah, I was fortunate. Tracy asked me to join her coaching team after I graduated from the program, and I have been doing that work for 12 years.
Yeah.
And along the way, Tracy certified me in her methodology. And so I am certified to carry her word forward. And unbeknownst to any of us that she would pass away.
Right.
And it's become even more important than ever to do that work.
Well, and part of your preparation, or maybe even the way that God looks at this with his lens, is that he knew, right, where Tracy would be, and he placed the right people into something that I think that as you're talking, I just have this vision of why would Jesus pick 12 men to go out into the world and to start the church and transform it? Why didn't he just do it himself? And when you said that when you become a leader, you realize that you need to have this team, the faith component is that everything that we read about in Scripture, everything that we hear about when it comes to trying to develop faith, is about surrendering to what God wants and what faith tells us, or what direction faith pulls us in, and to not fight it. And that's where true transformation begins. I think in full disclosure, Kurt has worked with Amy and Libby and I and here at the ministry, because as we moved from just having a evangelization ministry to the retreat house and the other development pieces of ministry, we had to learn to let go of some things that made us successful at the beginning or allowed us to start the business. And we had to let go of those things in order to move into a realm of a growing ministry.
Right. And it's been extraordinary work. Working with you guys, and it's just one of the tangents of the program.
Sure.
So I do work with professionals. I use this in my one-on-one executive coaching and group coaching, and have created a program with a partner called Renaissance.
Okay.
And Renaissance is taking this from the business perspective, if you will, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit organization, and sharing the methodology with them so that they can not just transform themselves individually,
right,
but transform their organizations.
Kind of like what you ended up doing.
That's exactly
for the
right.
bank.
Yes, exactly right.
Renaissance is an interesting word. What does Renaissance mean?
So Renaissance, we all know Renaissance, right? And that was kind of a rebirth, if you will, in a lot of ways for the world. And Renaissance is a takeoff, not a takeoff. It's a real live word.
Renaissance.
and it means new life.
Yeah,
it means new life, and that's what this methodology has done for me.
Yeah,
it's a new life.
Well, there is a dying to self, right? I think that we all meet. I think everybody meets this crossroads, and it's so confusing for so many people that we come to a crossroad, and whether it's situations in life that led us to this intersection, or it's just something bubbling with inside of us that wants change, we get to a point where we don't know how to transform and to let go of all the things that made us who we are. And so in your program and in the way that this program has been developed, what is the underlying methodology behind it? Because there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of people that do these things, but this is very different. So what would you say, how would you explain the foundation?
Yeah, the foundation, first of all, it's an ontological. It's not...
That's a big word.
It's a big word. It's a lot of work from philosophers who have been working in this area, had worked in this area for many years. Martin Heidegger wrote a lot about being in the world. And this word being is critical. Who are we being? Who are we being? How do we show up in the world out there? And that being is not just mental. It's not just intellectual. It's also emotional. It's what's happening in your head, in your heart, and in your gut.
Right.
I recently read that the gut actually has a lot of similarities to the brain. And
it has a lot
connection.
As a guy suffering from fibromyalgia, I can tell you how much my gut has to do with my brain. That is a true story.
Yes. So that the difference here, because as you said, there are a lot of programs out here. The defining differences, I would give you that this was Tracy's genius.
Yeah. And
Tracy identified something that she called the winning strategy. And the winning strategy is an unconscious survival strategy that comes from the human condition. So we all follow this human condition, which essentially is about, this is the way things should be, this is the way things shouldn't be, this is right, this is wrong. And if you take care of all these things, this is how you control life.
Right.
And you control life so it turns out this way and so it doesn't turn out that way.
Right.
Great.
Perception.
Interpretation, right?
Yeah.
It all the things then, and again, that's the big picture. And then it filters down. Men and women will have a different version of this winning strategy. And then cultures play a big role in winning strategies. Ultimately, each and every one of us has our own unique winning strategy. The methodology allows us to identify to the person specifically what their winning strategy is, which was heretofore unconscious. Once we identify it, people will find out that it is always, always there.
Right.
It is maddening once you know what it is.
Oh, and I will tell you that from experience that yes.
Yes.
But it also has helped me working with my colleagues in ministry to be able to know that that is their winning strategy. And I'm a little bit more merciful, but I'm also nudging them back to the direction of nothing should or shouldn't be. And so as you're listening, think about the fact that how many times in this week have you thought, well, that isn't right, or that shouldn't be that way, or it should be this way, or that person shouldn't have said that, or what if when I got this text, what the person really meant was this, and then you spiral out of control.
Yes, yes.
And this methodology of Tracy's winning strategy, I guess you would say journey.
Yeah.
That's what I would call it. That we let go of this thought that it has to be this way. Yeah. And the fact is, it is what it is. And this is kind of like if you go into Buddhist mentality, right? Mm-hmm. That if I'm meditating, nothing in the world is happening except that I'm breathing. Mm-hmm. That is what is happening in this moment. That is what I control. That is what I am doing. The rest of the world is maybe even in chaos around me.
Spinning around.
And I can't think about that. I have to think about my individual breath, and that's what I control. So as part of this transformational program, Kurt, if we understand that there are ways that things should or shouldn't be, and yes, I'm trying to get you to summarize something I know in 5 minutes that takes 2 weeks, but it really does take time because you have to identify that winning strategy first. And so you work with individuals to identify that winning strategy.
Right. Yeah, and to the person.
And what, just so that people would know, like, when you're identifying the winning strategy, is there an example of one that you could give, not in a whole, but just like one winning strategy or something that you identify?
Sure. Let me say this first, because I think this is good context for it. The winning strategy is called the winning strategy because it's a survival strategy. And if you're hearing this podcast, you're surviving. Right?
Yeah, right.
Now, the low end of survival is breathing.
Yes.
And on the high end of survival is success, certain levels of success.
Yeah.
The winning strategy is responsible for all of that success. It is also responsible for all of the limits that you have put on your life, unconsciously put on your life. Once people see that, they see that, if you will, the dark side of the winning strategy, the things that has held me back from doing because I didn't believe they were possible.
Right.
Maybe not here. I didn't think about that, but in the unconscious,
right,
it has set these borders up around you that say, I can't go there. I can't go there. I can only do what's here. And so that then is the limitation that it puts on us. And the goal here, and I think the goal for our God, is to be limitless.
Yeah. But to give an actual example of the winning strategy was I caught myself the other day being so safe that I was preparing myself and protecting myself from what would happen if I failed. And it like threw me over the edge. Yeah. Like immediately, like I thought, like, holy crap, you were thinking about what if this doesn't work? How in the world are you going to succeed if I'm trying to play it safe? But that was my winning strategy to protect me, because part of my winning strategy is to not let other people down, right? We identified that. So
Absolutely.
Like I do things so that other people aren't let down.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, I make the wrong decision if I'm not trying to let people down because I didn't take the risk where the risk was warranted.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. You know, the winning strategy is a recipe,
Yeah.
and it starts out with I listen for, and as Heidegger said, we're already always listening. Listen for, and I like to explain it as if there's an antenna on our head, and the antenna is like the old TV antenna on the roof.
Yeah.
It only picks up like one channel really well.
Yeah.
And everything else it just disregards.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I'm sorry, we're not
If you ever
watching
been in an old house, they used to have a dial so you could turn the antenna actually to follow the signal.
Shoot, but before that, you had somebody on the roof and somebody outside
Out
of
the
front
window.
door, and somebody inside, and then the person that was watching the TV said, right there, stop. And
A very dangerous game of telephone.
Dangerous game. But everything else it misses.
Yeah, yeah.
So that already listening for is the thing that you're listening for that you
One track.
got good at.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can contribute here.
Yeah,
It might be, how do I help somebody?
yeah,
How can I help? How can I help make this happen?
yeah.
All right. And I just got hit. And this happens on a conference call, and a Zoom call, and a meeting, and out in our world. It hits us.
Right.
And then we're in action. And that next piece of the recipe is, so as to act by. Which action do I take right now? Well, this is how I go into action, right? I analyze, I do this, I do whatever it is. It's different for every person.
Right.
But you know that when you see that, when we decipher that and identify it, like, oh yeah, that is definitely me. And all the people that know you, by the way, they know that's true too.
Right. Yeah. And you get a sense, like a good example would be is if you know somebody, maybe you're at a dinner party and the conversation is going in one direction and then somebody interjects and everybody's like, what are they talking about? It's because they're in that one track mind that the way that they contribute is this way.
Yes.
And they missed out on contributing really to the conversation, and they just made a statement because that's all they were comfortable with doing.
Yeah. And the other people in the room are either dismissing that because that doesn't make sense to them, and now they're thinking you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I have
true.
the answer.
Yeah.
And then I think you're an idiot. Well,
Yeah, right.
That really is helpful.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, those two first pieces
To listen for and to act by.
to listen for and to act by is in order for
In
life
order
to
to.
turn out this way,
Yeah.
and to avoid life turning out this way. Anytime there's a threat to our avoid or our in order to, this is how life should turn out, this is how life shouldn't turn out. Any threat that comes in there, we react very strongly from our winning strategy.
Right.
Like, as you said, you don't want to let people down. That's one of your avoids,
Right.
is to let people down. If anything is happening in your life where you feel the threat that I'm going to let somebody down, you won't go wherever it was you wanted to go.
Right.
And you just said it.
Yeah.
There's a great example of a limitation.
Yeah.
What could you have done? How could you have changed the world
Right.
if you hadn't backed off? And that's where this terminology of possible and impossible, and people have a hard time saying something's impossible because they think that means there's something wrong with me.
Right,
Well,
right.
everything's possible. Well,
Yeah.
everything's possible with God. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
But He needs you to take some ownership of that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of 4-foot people that can dunk a basketball.
Well, you say that, but who knows?
Yeah, right. I just said not a lot.
Not
You know,
a lot. Yeah, that's right.
There are some. But it kind of gives me that image that people always talk about, that if there's a crash in a NASCAR race, you don't let off of the gas, right? That would be your natural instinct, that there is a crash ahead of me. I have to let off the gas and I have to do it. Well, that's the most dangerous thing that person can do. They have to do what's countercultural, counterintuitive, and you floor it and you listen to your spotter who guides you through the wreck, because you have people behind you, you have people in front of you. And if you go with your winning strategy, which makes logical sense, probably in the human brain, you would avoid caution. But this tells you that this is the safest pathway through. And I think that when we are transformed, it may not always seem to our old self like this makes sense. But as we're going through it, we accept it. and then we begin to live it. And I think that's where true transformation takes place.
Yeah, because until then, we're living small.
Yeah.
And our God does not want us to live small.
Yeah.
And we're living small, and we're living safe because we're living in the constraints of this winning strategy so we can survive. Well, is survival good enough?
Right.
If it's good enough for you, then okay.
Yeah.
Then you don't want to take this on.
Yeah.
But do you want to live big? Do you want to live up to the gifts that you've been given?
Yeah. Nowhere in the Bible does it says God made you to exist.
Yeah.
Right. I just made people to exist. That's all I want.
Good luck,
Yeah. No, we were made by God for God to return to God. And I think that this allows us to do that. And it also, and I don't think Tracy, you would know better than I, but I think from our conversations, Tracy didn't make this with a faith-based intention in mind, right? It's personal development. But you've begun to see some people desiring faith components into their own transformational opportunities.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because I had mentioned Tracy has done this work all over the world, and she has had very high-level leaders from just about every religion you could imagine in the program.
Yeah, I bet.
And when you start to talk about shoulds and shouldn'ts and do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs, and then Tracy says something like, well, there's no way things should be, all of a sudden, the red flags go, well, no, wait.
Yeah. I always add morally and ethically. That's the piece when I talk about faith. I'm like, morally and ethically, yes, there are things, but
The difference is then we get into the language, which is the ontological part of this, is language of being, is that there shoulds, shouldn'ts, rights and wrongs are always and only either a declaration, a promise, or an interpretation.
Okay.
A declaration would be, I declare this to be true. A promise would be, I promise I'm a part of the Catholic Church. Therefore, as a part of the Catholic Church, I've made a promise to follow the rules of the church.
Okay.
So when somebody says, well, there's no way things should be, that's a challenge to my religion. Not if you've made a promise to that religion.
Right.
You have said, this is my truth, and I
Right.
will do that. Or, and here's the important part, or it's just an interpretation. And interpretation is critical in this methodology because if all of our thoughts and all of our actions come from our winning strategy, our winning strategy is made up on the past. That is what then forms our interpretations.
And that's where we'll stay.
And that's where we'll stick. So interpretations, when something happens, we interpret everything as human beings, and we will always interpret everything as human beings. So something happens, I interpret it, I give it meaning. The meaning comes from the winning strategy.
My
Right?
perception.
This is how I see it. And then we take our action because we have no alternative. We take our action from the interpretation.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Then that action creates something else to happen. And we interpret it from our past, from our winning strategy.
All I see is this cycle. I just see
It's
this
a vicious
circle.
cycle, and it's a cycle of addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
The winning strategy gets stronger and stronger and stronger because each time we feed it with a success, it's like an addict who needs more and more and more.
Right.
But it's the only game we know.
Well, it's the safety mechanism, right? It's the safety mechanism to say, see, I told you this would be this way, and that's how I interpreted it. Or I can't believe so-and-so did that, and this is what proves me right. Well, that's your interpretation of why they did that. That's what you think. You don't know the whole person. And I think that what this also does, ironically, is it makes us more empathetic to our human man and woman around us, the human person as a whole, that we can become empathetic to know that a situation exists for a vulnerable person, a homeless person, somebody suffering from mental illness, and we become empathetic with There isn't any way that they should be. This is the situation they're in, and they have their own story. And if we realize that, not only are we transforming the way that we are, but we're transforming the way that we become involved in helping other people.
Right. And that's a great example of what being is about. Being is a hard word for people to understand. But who are you being? Are you being that judgmental person based upon your interpretations?
Right.
Or are you being a person that is about something bigger? And that's how you get out of the cycle of addiction. Something happens, you're going to interpret it.
Right.
You have no choice as a human being. But you say, well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating interpretation, Kurt. And you set it aside. You have it.
Yeah.
But you don't say it's the truth.
You don't feed it.
Right. And your action then, therefore, does not come from there. Your action comes in service of what you're committed to. Get clear then on what you're committed to.
Yeah.
Am I a child of God, and do I care about that homeless person or this person that irritates me? But I know that somewhere in there is what are you committed to? And your action then is in service of that.
Yeah.
And that is starting to get you into the world of who I'm being in the world.
And I also see this growth in faith, right? As you're saying this, movement of how we interpret things. So we react to a situation, and we've always prayed one way to get out of this. But you're either moving forward in faith or you're falling backwards. You're never staying in the same place, right? So you're either growing in faith or you're starting to regress. And I think you have to know that, because you can't react to a situation the same way that you've always reacted when you're trying to infuse your faith into it. God is always... He is all-knowing. He knows where we need to go, where we need to be. And so for Catholic Christians that might grab a rosary when something happens, are you really focusing on the words of that rosary? Are you allowing that to transform you, or are you just doing that action because it's what you've always done?
And by rote.
Yeah. And that is growth. That is transformation again, right? Like, we have to transform. Why I love this so much is that we have to continue to transform our faith life in the same way that we transform who we are, for lack of a better word, I'll say in our personalities or in our being, but we're transforming that always into something new that is adaptable to what's in front of us. Otherwise, if you know somebody who seems miserable all the time, or seems like they're always being jaded or jilted, or the one that's being screwed over, it's because they interpret everything that's happening in their world.
That's right.
And they think that guy's holier than me, so he prays more. That person, they're naive, so they believe in God. Yeah. No, the strongest people in the world that I know that are successful give glory to God. Yeah. And we've seen it in some sports recently, and it's been kind of neat to see not just players who say, I want to thank my Lord and Savior at the end of their speech, but these are people that are actually talking about, we lost today, but Christ is bigger than this. And to me, I see the transformation in that, because, you lost, so what? I would tell Kurt things that would happen to me. This is a funny personal story that in my early days of coaching, because we've been working together a little bit over 5 years on this personally, and I would tell Kurt, I'd say, this happened, and he'd say, yeah, so what? And I'm like, man, Kurt's a jerk. Why? He's just like, so what? But then I understand it. And that was one of the things that you talked about, that how did you say that people just need to get it?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, when we're working through this, and Greg, as you know, the program that you and I have been working on is and taking the methodology and incorporating scripture into it.
Correct.
And this is what has happened to the people I mentioned earlier who have gone through the program from very high religious positions, right?
Yeah.
And they start to see that there is no contradiction here between the methodology and faith. And in fact, it's hugely complementary. And in fact, it's what Jesus was talking about and teaching us, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's just, as we start to talk about it, it's like, well, here's another connection. Well, here's another. And
we said that
everywhere.
We sat down with the program and scripturally began to put stories and encounters and everything to see where this was at work. And that was probably the easiest part of the process because you can name, thousands of encounters if you go through the Bible back to the Old Testament, but even just in the New Testament and just in Jesus being with people, and you just see the transformations happen that way. And so, so this project that we're working on will not only take the transformational leadership and give the faith component to it, to give scripture, but it will not only change you personally, but I think it's going to change your relationship with God. Absolutely. In the way that you see him as just a genie where you rub a lamp and he answers your prayer and then you move on to the next thing.
Right.
It makes you responsible for being part of the change, being that change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in your family, was faith always important? Like, it seems that your family always had this connection to church in some way, shape, or form.
Sure. Yeah. And as I said, my father was a choir director for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I was raised Lutheran.
Right.
And I remained Lutheran. In fact, Wittenberg was a Lutheran college, as many schools, have
some affiliation.
Connection. But when I married my wife now 37 years ago, and we adopted our daughter, Libby.
Beautiful Libby.
From Seoul, Korea, and she has been just a gift from day one. But we raised her Catholic, and so ultimately I converted. Because of our pastor and priest at Holy Angels, who I went to the Holy Land with a group, and we got back. He said, I just have to tell you, you're more Catholic than a lot of the Catholics in this church. Why don't we make that official? And since I was singing in the choir, I thought, well, I guess that makes sense. So.
That's funny because I know some other people that there was a guy, a friend of ours that was in men's fellowship. He was. For 25 years, he came to church with his wife before he converted over to Catholicism, which, whether he did or not, is not my business. But, when you think about it and you fall in love with it, you say, it's time to, that's where God's leading me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, your growth process, I think it's been interesting because I would say that sometimes people compartmentalize secular leadership from faith-based trust, let's just say. A lot of people think that these two things can't exist, especially in the business world or in our jobs. Mm-hmm. We live in a world where we're afraid to profess what we believe. We don't just want to deal with it. People don't even want to make the sign of the cross at a restaurant when to bless themselves because they don't want to be judged, right?
Yeah.
But I'm so impressed that you understand the beauty of taking faith and real life and putting them together, because that's the way that we change the world.
Yeah.
Not by leaving them compartmentalized.
Right. Well, it's like somebody who says they want, they want to keep their personal life and their work life separate.
Right.
That is nonsense. It can't happen. They intertwine in so many places because it's your life.
Right.
And the same thing with religion.
Yeah.
Why do you need to do that? Why do you want to try to do that?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I'd add to that. When we talk about this interpretation thing,
mm-hmm.
and then it's about stories, right? It's always about stories.
Yeah.
Everybody has their story. In fact, we have people write their story and share their story, and there's a vulnerability that's involved there. And I'll tell you my story in a minute. But I want to share this one little one because, to your point, this methodology and the methodology in the Renaissance program, which is more secular, mm-hmm. and the program you and I are working on, are not just working on, we have.
Yeah.
Under the banner of Restore.
Right.
Is about family. It's what happens in your personal life. It's what happens in your business life. It's what happens in your religious life. It's what happens in your life.
Yeah.
And so here's a little snippet stories. So we were in a program, one of Tracy's programs, and the question to the group was, tell me something that that is a circumstance in your life right now that you've tried to fix it and you haven't been able to fix it, and it's there, and it's really bothering you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but it goes around. There was an older gentleman in the program, and he was very attentive the whole time, but he didn't talk a lot. And he finally said, "Okay, here's my story." He said, "My son and daughter-in-law had a child, our first grandchild, and they lived out of state, but we were over the moon. And,
Yeah.
we would go see him as often as we could, and blah, blah, blah. And when he was about 3 years old, they asked us to come down to stay with them for a little while, and it was during the holidays, before the holidays, and we were there, and they said, hey, we would love to get out and get some Christmas shopping done. Do you mind staying with them? Of course not. We'd love to
Sure.
stay with the baby. Fast forward, the son and daughter-in-law come home, and the grandparents are there, and the grandparents are all excited. And they say, you got to see this. And they have a picture of the baby, if you will, the child, with Santa Claus. And they just thought it was so awesome,
It
right?
was just a great day.
And the daughter-in-law says, you had no right to do that.
Whoa.
And the son-in-law echoed her. Like, why did you do that? And the grandparents saw this. They didn't think it was any big deal. I said,
Yeah,
"Well,
right.
What do you mean?
This is a joyful occasion.
This is great. Isn't
Yeah.
this great? We didn't tell you could do that. You shouldn't have done that. Blah, blah, all the shoulds, right? Blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And so what happens is our winning strategies kick in, and the grandparents are like, well, we raised you, and you seem
boy.
okay, and blah, blah, blah. And the parents dig in of
Yeah,
the
right.
child, da, da, da. And long story short, the grandparents leave the next day
Ugh.
because it's that bad.
Man, that escalated quickly.
We said, well, how long ago did this happen? It was 2 years. He said, we haven't seen our grandson in 2 years.
Ugh.
Well, what did you do? Why? I tried to call. My son calls once a week on Sundays. It's essentially, everybody okay? Yeah, we're okay. Okay, great.
Take
That's
care.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's not what the relationship used to be. And so, Tracy would ask the person, well, what have you tried? Well, I tried to apologize. Well, what did that sound like? He said, well, listen, I'm sorry, that upset you, but, this isn't anything that was
Yeah. I was not wrong.
That's
That's
not
what I
wrong.
do.
And that's right, So she said, what do you need to do? And he didn't know.
Yeah.
Now, everybody in the class knew. Everybody else in the program knew. And finally, it was, I need to apologize. Yeah, but what does that apology need to sound like?
Yeah. What does it really need
What's
to
it
be?
really need to be? I apologize. I hurt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's it. Not an explanation, an apology. I hope you can forgive me. And if you do, I'd love to talk to you about it.
Less is more.
Yeah. And so, because everything else was driven by that winning strategy, everything else was driven by that survival strategy. I have to be right. This is the way things should be.
Greg,
That pervasive, right?
yeah.
So here's the end of the story, and this is
right.
amazing. So there's without getting into it, there's a big production that happens. This happened on Wednesday that he shared this story, and then on a Thursday night, we have I apologize, on Wednesday, and then on Wednesday night he called his son. And the next morning, we're there on Thursday, and he shares with us that he called his son, and he apologized to him.
Yeah.
And he said, we talked for an hour and a half.
Wasn't just a check-in.
Wasn't just a check-in. That night, we have this big performance night, and it's a big deal for the participants. By the way, the Renaissance program and our program are not 2-week programs.
Yeah, right.
We're talking a couple of days here.
Yeah.
the next morning after the performance number, everybody's there and it's always a check-in. How's everybody doing? And he says, I got to tell everybody something that happened. He says, I was in a taxi on the way to the performance venue last night.
Mm-hmm.
And my son called me and he said, Dad, good luck tonight.
Wow.
I get chills today
Yeah.
when I think about that. And it changed his life. You know, why did it change his life? It changed his life because he gave up having to be right.
He restored that relationship
Yeah,
with
what's
his son.
more important? There it is. What's the commitment? The commitment is to have a loving relationship with my family.
Yeah.
And I take action there. I don't take it from what I think is right and wrong.
Right.
And that's where the freedom comes in, Greg. You were talking about the freedom of it.
Yeah, freedom.
It's the freedom. All of our stress comes from our interpretations. It's a big, bold statement. And I hold that it's true.
I agree so much, and I couldn't help but think about a story that I heard about, talking about the love of God the Father, right? I mean, how can you go wrong, right? God the Father loves you. You think that statement is a beautiful statement. God the Father loves you. Do you know how many people have had situations with a father who did not act as a father should? Or how many people grew up without a father?
Yeah.
And so we say things and we think just because we said it that it's gospel or it's just the way that things always were. When I've done certain presentations with young people, I've never forgotten that I know that not everybody knows the real love and how a father should care for a child. Yeah. And so for some people, you have to meet them where they are. That's and you have to change the story.
That's right.
And so I do think that transforms us. And I think that as you're listening today, that you're led here because there is something for you to be transformed. There is a process in which you want to let go of something that you've been holding on to or something that you can't see differently that you might even know is not right or not the way that you believe that it should be looked at.
Yeah.
And so maybe faith hasn't worked, maybe motivation hasn't worked, but there is hope. Sorry, Kurt, but there is a good hope.
It's a good word. It's a good
word. I know. But no, there is the hope of restoration. There's the hope of the resurrection. Yeah. And when we look at hope that way, we're never wrong, that there is the hope that something is available for you to grow immensely into the person that God created you to be. So as we wind down, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share or anything that we didn't get to that today you just want people to know?
Yeah, I think I'd ask people the question of, what happened to their dreams? When you're 5 or 8 and you didn't even understand the word impossible.
Yeah.
What were those dreams that they're gone?
For sure.
And the world beat it out of us. It did. And there's a lot of reasons. You had with especially now with the prevalence of the internet and news.
Comparison.
And all the ugly. Life beat it out of us.
Yeah.
But it's still there.
Yeah.
And we've all fallen into living a very small life.
Yeah.
And that's not why we're here. We're here to live big and to make an impact, make a difference in people's lives. And your impact is going to be different than mine. Mm-hmm. And that's fabulous.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Actually, it's what's needed.
It's absolutely needed.
Yeah.
You know what? But what have we given up on? And how about picking that up again?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what this is all about. This is letting people live a limitless life and take on the things that maybe they are afraid of taking on or they do think are impossible, if that's a word, right?
Yeah.
But just those things that, I can never do. Sure you can.
Yeah.
And so what if you try and you fail? It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a great way to live.
You know what I love about you is that there's lots of things I love about you because you're a good man, but I love that in a time where you could be taking it easy and starting to take a step back, that you've actually pressed the accelerator and that you're working to grow because you want to change lives.
Absolutely.
And that you've transformed, but because you share your story, because you share your passion, that isn't the easy way out, but it is the way that God's calling you to work. And that's all it is. Faith and real life coming together is just about you saying, Lord, how do you want to use me? And how am I doing this, not just for myself, but for the common good?
Yeah.
And I even think about couples that are struggling in relationships and how transformative this methodology really is for people to see each other differently.
Yes.
And to work through differences that really don't exist. They're just interpretations.
Yeah. What happened with love thy neighbor?
Yeah.
Right.
And we also know what happened when people interpreted Jesus other than what Jesus' true intention was.
Exactly right.
And if you believe that in faith, then you can understand where all this is coming from.
Yes. By the way, you should not preach on the Sabbath, or you should not work on the Sabbath. What's wrong with you, Jesus?
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a big should for you.
Yeah, I am the bridegroom. I'm the one you were waiting for. But if you want to learn more about Kurt and the work that he's doing in the program of transformation with Renaissance, go to renaissanceprogram.com, and you'll be able to see some more information about that. And your partner in the Renaissance program, you have
Yes, Eliza.
Okay.
Eliza Wing and I. And
Wonderful.
I've known Eliza for a number of years, and she's extraordinary. And what we have done there is we have taken the methodology, the transformational methodology, and in order to bring it out of just intellectually,
Right.
get it, right, into our bodies, into our heart, and into our soul,
Yeah.
we use meditative practices and somatic practices to take that so that we can fully be.
Yeah.
And that's what the program does.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-care is about the whole person,
Yeah.
and self-care is about the way that we see things. If we cannot just go on a retreat and be transformed and then go back to the world and want it to be the way that we want. So, again, I just want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for chatting. Thanks for being a friend. And, we, with our Restore initiative on this transformation development, it's amazing, and there's going to be more information about that on the website very soon, and we are excited for you to be part of it. So if you'd like more information about faith and real life, you can always go to faithandreallife.com. If you've enjoyed the Faith and Real Life podcast, you can go on all of your podcasting platforms, and you'll be able to find the show there and go back to any one of our couple hundred episodes that we have of different faith and real life moments and the Faith and Real Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we ask that you do share it. Make sure that you share it with anybody who you think might need it. Post it on your social media and like it. That is the way that we continue to do what we do, and let our sponsors know that we are actually making an impact with those who are listening to our show. So thanks for being with us. Kurt, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, no, my thanks go to you and the work that you do and have been doing for 15 years, and the difference you've made in people's lives, but more importantly, the difference you're going to make, Greg.
Amen.
It has been extraordinary work, and you're just starting.
Let me be.
I'm excited for it. I will let you be.
Thanks, my brother. God bless you. Take care. Have a great week, and we will see you again very soon.